Hello and welcome to my show Indus Cuisine, and I'm your chef Basim Akhund. We're back with another new episode from the heart of Pakistan. Today's recipe is very easy and it dates back to the time when the East India Company was ruling over Pakistan, or you could also say the subcontinent. Back in the day when the Britishers came to Pakistan, they introduced their own recipes. But when we talk about the British cuisine, it was very mild. And when we talk about the Pakistani cuisine, it is filled with spices and masalas and herbs which are locally grown in our own region. So these people, the Britishers back in the day, the East India Company soldiers, the workers, the bureaucrats back in the day, brought their first recipe called the mutton stew. The mutton stew was basically a recipe in which they used to add potatoes, water, the mutton, and just a few herbs such as cinnamon and cardamom, and they used to boil the mutton till the time the mutton was very soft. But this recipe was not very welcomed by the Pakistani people back in the day. Why? Because we loved our spices, our herbs, and the fresh aroma of all these things. So when the Pakistanis back in the day introduced their own spices to the recipes, they introduced a recipe called mutton stew. I'm not pronouncing it wrong, but in our own language we used to call it mutton stew, and when you talk about the Britishers, they used to call it mutton stew. So you could say this recipe dates back to around 1920 when the Britishers were ruling the subcontinent as people who came for trade and then soon took over from the Mughals also. Okay, this recipe is very easy and all the ingredients which you will find in this recipe are easily available in any store near you. But when I say a store, I mean a store which has desi ingredients. The ingredients are, when you talk about the vegetables which are fresh, you need around 3 tomatoes and 2 onions. These are the ingredients, and the meat what we're using today is mutton, and the mutton needs to be with bone, so we'll be using around 1 kg. And the spices you need are dried red chilies. If you don't find red chilies which are dried, the ones which are round, what you can do is you can take the other shape also. But remember one thing, as I always tell you, the bigger the chili, the less spicy it is. Then if you want, you should take around coriander powder, some cloves, you need black peppercorn, you need some black cinnamon, salt to taste, you need black cardamom, then you need around 3 cloves of garlic, some ginger, you need some cumin seeds, you need clarified butter around a 1/4 cup, some yogurt, and that is it. And in the end, you'll be adding some sesame seeds also. These are all the ingredients you need. This recipe will be made in 2 parts. Why? Because we need the mutton first to boil in some water. But if you start boiling the mutton in water, which is actually used without a pressure cooker, it will take around 15 to 20 minutes. But if you want to save your time, what you can do is you can take a pressure cooker, which is over here, and you can bring the water to heat and then add the mutton in it. So what we'll do is we'll bring the water to heat first, and we shall add around, you could say, 3 to 4 cups of water, or you'll add water till the time the mutton is submerged. When I say the mutton needs to be submerged, it doesn't mean that the mutton should be floating. The mutton should be submerged to a point that there is just around 1 inch of water above the mutton pieces, and that is about it, because the more water you will add, the more diluted the flavor will get. This is a recipe in which you should have some gravy. You can have this recipe with rice, or you can have this recipe with some flatbread also. So what I'll do is I'll pass, or I can just add in the mutton pieces. I shall show you the water level over here. I'll pick the thing up, I'll put it over here, and you need to see that the water should be just 1 inch above the mutton pieces. That's it. So add some water, spread it out, and as you can see, now when I'll place the mutton pieces properly, it will be cooked efficiently. Okay, now this is not it. What you need to do next is spread it out. I prefer using the bone. Why? Because the flavor for this recipe comes from the bone, remember that, and if you do not use the bone, you won't get that flavor you need. Okay, we'll be using some salt. When you talk about salt, you'll be adding around just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Why? Because we'll be using this water in our food also. So just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt goes in, and then what you'll do, you will take some ginger, not too much, and I shall add it to the pressure cooker. So what I'll do is I'll just make these thick pieces, 4 pieces, I'll add it over here to bring out the flavor. And also what it shall do is that the mutton, this mutton has this very strong aroma. People say we do not like it. So if you want to kill down the aroma, what ginger does is it reduces the strong aroma, which some people do not prefer. Okay, when this is done, what I'll do is I'll just take 2 pieces of cloves, I'll add it over here, and I shall just take some black peppercorn, let's say 4 to 5 pieces, and add it in this. Okay, this is done. What I'll do is I'll place a lid on top, press it down, and it's done. Okay, when you see this whistle start blowing, you should start counting 6 to 7 minutes, not before that. So let this come to heat, and what's the next step? The next step is preparing all the other ingredients you need. Some people, what do is they start frying it or they start boiling it, but we shall just saute it lightly and then we shall take this recipe forward. So firstly, what do you need? You need a frying pan. Okay, what we'll do is we'll pick up a frying pan and we'll keep it over here. The frying pan goes here. Increase the heat. Once the pan comes to heat, I'll add the clarified butter, but not before that. Okay, so reduce the heat to, let's say, medium. Once it comes to heat, we shall add all the other ingredients over there. Okay, when we talk about the onions for this recipe, the onions for this recipe need to be finely chopped. Finely chopped, why? Because we do not want the onion to have this coarse texture. We want it to be nice and soft, and it should be translucent to a point that it amalgamates or mixes in the recipe properly. Okay, this is done. What I'll do is the root should be on, so I'll just cut the onion like this and I'll keep it on the side. What does the root do? The root keeps the onion together. Why? Because the onion from inside, if you see the concentration, it's different pieces of the onion coming together and forming this vegetable. This is Mother Nature, and the Mother Nature is helped by the root, which holds everything together. And as you know, there's a saying, if you have deep roots, traditionally you go a long way. The same is for anything which you eat or which is edible. If you have proper roots, the vegetable or the fruit that you're growing will be sweeter, will be more tastier, will be more delicious. Okay, this is done. What I'll do is, because the height of the onion is too high, I'll make 2 cuts like this and I'll go as close as I can. I'll keep the onion in the center of the board and I'll slowly and gradually chop it. Go as close as you can, and the root of the onion goes into the dustbin. I'll do this for all the 4 onions and then I'll tell you what to do next. But remember one thing, I'll say it again, keep the root on and always keep listening. Why do I say keep listening? Why? Because we're multitasking over here. On one side, the pan is getting hot. On the other side, as you can see, this is cooking. So when it comes to heat, just reduce the heat to medium. Do not keep it too high because you want to control the evaporation in the pressure cooker. This is done. Now start chopping it really close. This is done. And the root goes into the dustbin. Root goes into the dustbin. And now, slowly and gradually, you shall keep continuing it. Okay, because the onions are bigger than medium, what I'll do is I'll just take 1.5 onion and I'll keep the rest for later. You need to see when you cook as you go that the size of the onion also matters, but at times when you start buying all of these equipments, there are times when you have some limited things available in the grocery market. So when this is done, I'll just take a spatula, which is over here, and I shall transfer it to the pan. It goes into the pan. And now I'll bring it to heat properly. When this is done, what I'll do is I'll keep this on the side. I'll bring the pan to heat properly, and once the clarified butter has melted, I shall add the other things. Okay, when you say clarified butter, you can never replace clarified butter with normal butter, or also known as French butter or unsalted butter. Why? Because clarified butter, the taste, the flavor is completely different. They are miles apart. This thing is used for desi recipes, traditional recipes. The other butter, which you get in the market, is used for other recipes. This has a very distinct aroma to it, and you need to remember that aroma is very important in our desi Pakistani recipes. Okay, now just move it. And reduce the heat to medium. When this is done, what I'll do is I'll transfer the onions. And then I will add just a little bit of salt. You need to add a little bit of salt. Why? When you add salt, the salt takes out the moisture from all the vegetables or fruits if you want to use in a food, also in a recipe. and it helps it to disintegrate or get softer. So what I'll do is I'll just tilt it and add just 2 pinches of salt. This is done. Start mixing it and coat all of the onions properly with the clarified butter. This is done. I'll pick up a wooden spatula now. I'll press it down. Reduce the heat to low. And now keep a lid on top. Now when you keep a lid on top, what will happen is that the moisture inside will be properly encapsulated and the onions will be cooked properly, and that is what you need. Why? Because if you take lid off, what will happen is the outer layer of the onion will get brown and the center part of the onion won't be cooked properly. If you want the onion to be very translucent properly, what you need to do is you need to keep a lid on top so that the heat is properly distributed and you get the perfect translucent onion you require for this recipe. So when this is cooking, what we'll do on the other side is we shall prepare some other ingredients. For that, what we'll need is I need another pan and I need to shift this towards another stove. Now if you can see that the pan is hot, the other thing what you can do is when you can multitask is you can shift it to another stove. Now because the pan is hot, it will remain hot for another 2-3 minutes, and that's time we need to give to the onions. That is it, right? So it will keep cooking. If you come and see closer, which I can't show you right now, there are still bubbles going on even when the stove is off. So this one goes over here. And now what we'll do is we shall dry roast some of the ingredients before we add them. So when you dry roast some of the ingredients, you increase the heat to full, and when it will come to heat, because there is some water inside, because whenever you wash it, there is some moisture, you want that moisture to go away, and then you shall add some things. Now what are these things that you can add? You need to add some sesame seeds. Why? Because I want the sesame seeds to be a bit brown, and remember we are dry roasting them, we are not cooking them. And then what you need is you need around 8 to 10 cloves right now, and I shall count them and I shall keep it on the board. Why? Why am I counting them? It's because these herbs, or you could say this masala, is very small, but it is filled with flavor. Okay, now if you see the water is coming out, just put the stove on the pilot, and then there is heat inside, it's more than enough, and it will be fine. Just pick up a tissue, it's a pressure cooker, it happens, it's not a big deal. Wipe it like this, clean, and just throw it in the dustbin. Small things take you a long way. So 8 pieces of cloves, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. 8 pieces, they go in. I'm going to just dry roast them. You might be saying, what is he doing? But this is how you do this recipe, remember that. And now you shall add the sesame seeds. This is done. Move it around. Give it around 30 seconds, not more. And as you can see, I think it's been 5 minutes now. So what I'll do is I shall open the pressure cooker. But remember, whenever you're opening the pressure cooker, you need to always let it cool down for 20 minutes and then open it. That's why I'm not going to open it live in front of you. And when you see the sesame seeds bouncing, pick the lid off, transfer them over here. Okay, the flavor enhances, remember that. I'll keep this over here, I'll keep this over here, and I shall start mixing it. See, the pan was still hot, that's why they're bubbling again. Mix it up and let it cook for another 2 minutes on the pilot. So till the time this is cooking, just go for a short break, and once we're back, I'll tell you what to do next. There's a lot of work left. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching Indus Cuisine. Welcome back. You're watching Indus Cuisine, and I'm your chef Basim Akhund. During the break, I just waited for you. And the other thing I did was, which was very important, was I waited for the pressure cooker to cool down. Once it cooled down, I took the meat out. Now on my right, you can see the meat over here, which is nice and tender. I'll show it to you. See, it's so soft. If I press it too much, it's going to fall apart. Do not do that because you need to cook it. And on the other end, I saved the beautiful broth that was in this recipe. You need this broth. Why? Because this is the flavor which will add the, you could say, gravy to the recipe. This is all the natural flavor. And whenever you're using a pressure cooker, try saving that water if you're doing a meat form or any form of protein like chicken. Why? Because that is the broth which you use in your recipe. There's no need to go outside and get like a chicken cube or a beef cube or any form of powdered version of all this if you can do it at home and if you have time. Okay, on the other hand, the onions are translucent. I'll shift it over here. Why? Because now this recipe will be cooked in a wok. Remember why? Because whenever you're cooking, you could say a broth recipe, do not use a pan because when the base is too flat, there is more evaporation. When there is more evaporation, towards the end you won't have anything left in terms of this gravy you would require with the naan bread or a normal bread or with some rice. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll pick up a wok and I'll bring the wok over here and I shall bring it to heat. I usually use this part as the place where I can keep my, the lids of the pan. Why? Because it's easy, it's more convenient. I shall increase the heat to full and then I shall transfer all of these ingredients over here. Remember, you want all the ingredients from this pan over here, so take a good spatula and scrape it out and try sourcing as much as you can without wasting anything. Okay, so I'll just transfer this over here. And when I say everything, I mean the clarified butter that sticks to the pan. Why? Because that if you collect it, it would actually amount to at least a tablespoon. And if you're just using a quarter cup is hardly more than 2.5, 3 tablespoons. So I'd rather not waste anything. Okay, when you're done with this, pick it up and keep it in the sink so that's washed later on. And now let's get cooking. Okay, so firstly what do you need is you need the red chilies. For this I will not chop the red chilies which are dried. I shall just keep them over here and just press them like this so that when I cook them, the seeds will start transferring. Okay, so I'll be transferring all of this in the oil, or you could say the clarified butter, and I shall fry it. Why? Because I want the flavor to come out. So I'll tilt the pan, I'll submerge it in, and I'll fry it for like 15 to 20 seconds, not more. Okay, what will happen is eventually the chilies will get soft and the flavor will start amalgamating in this. Okay, this is done. Now reduce the heat to low, or you could say the pilot. First what we need is we need the ginger. I shall slice it for this recipe. But when you say slice, if you can finely slice it, then go ahead. But if you can't finely slice it, then you should shred it. Because when you finely slice it, if it comes in your bite, it gives a nice taste, nice texture. But if it's too thick, it will ruin everything else. Remember that, because ginger is very strong. Okay, this is done. I shall add it to the wok right now. Why? Because there's oil up there and I want to fry it for around, you could say, 30 seconds. Okay, this is done. Now submerge it, increase the heat to medium. Spread it out and just mash it a bit more so that ginger isn't sticking and it starts, separating properly, because ginger has strands in it, and when you cook this you don't want it to be sticking with each other because of the strands which are in it. Okay, this is done. I gave it like 30 seconds. Now I shall switch the stove off, give it a lid and let it rest. Why? Because now I need the tomatoes. The tomatoes go here. With the tomatoes I shall just take the eye of the tomato out, which is this part. And remember, because we're making a stew, also known as ish stew in our language, we shall add the tomatoes to the blender and we shall convert it into a fine paste. Why? Because I want it to have a nice fine texture. Remember that. Okay, so just take the lid off and place the tomatoes in this. Now you will not add any form of water. Remember that. What I'll do is I shall just pick this beautiful bowl of mutton broth. Take around 1 cup and add it into this. Keep it on a plate, do not let it go to waste, and give it a lid and just blend it properly. This is done. Now, what you'll do is first you should add it to the wok over here. But before that, you should take cumin, add it over here. Salt to taste, so let's say around half a teaspoon of salt. Then you want some black peppercorn. Keep this on the side, whatever you've used, just let it go, and some coriander powder. The coriander powder goes here. So I've added all the spices, I'll mix it up properly now. Increase the heat now to around full. And as you can see, everything is properly cooked, the flavor is in. But whenever we talk about stew, I do not like this texture, the stuffed texture of onion in this. So what I'll do now is I'll reduce the heat. Now just see carefully. I'll transfer all of this into this place. Okay, so just gather all the ingredients, pick it up and transfer it over here. You want it to convert into a fine paste. Why? Because you want that finesse for the recipe. And if you don't have time, it's fine, you could do that without it also, but this way the flavor of the recipe will enhance, and that is what I need. I need my recipe to be perfect. Why? Because whenever you serve something, cook something with your heart. Okay, so when I will process that into a nice fine paste, the other thing what I'll do is I'll let you know, and there are some herbs that are left, there are some spices that are left, I'll be adding to the recipe and I'll let you know just in a minute. Okay, this is done. Place the lid on. And this is done. Okay, now increase the heat to full over here, and firstly take the pieces of garlic. Okay, so let's say reduce it to low or medium. Why? Because now I want the garlic to be finely sliced. Okay, so just finely slice the garlic, and when I say finely, it's because when you shall have this recipe, pieces of the garlic will come in your mouth. If it's not fine, what will happen is you shall get this bursting aroma of garlic and all the other spices will get dominated, and you do not want that. You want all the ingredients to balance out properly. So remember one thing, that it's very important to deal with your ingredients with respect, love and care, and with precision. Okay, the pan has come to heat. I'll just transfer all of it over here. Mix it up. I'm sauteing the garlic right now. I'll tell you why am I doing it right now. The reason is that if I add the paste over here, the garlic will not get a chance to cook. It will cook in that, but the flavor will change. Now what I'll do is I'll pick up just a handful or a ladle of this tomato broth and cook the garlic on high heat over here. You can see the garlic cooking on high heat. Let it cook over here, and when the water is almost half, I shall add all of this into this. So as you can see, it's cooking now, and there's this nice thick frothy texture which is changing the whole flavor of the garlic. And as you can see, the water is also turning brown. This will add the color also to the recipe which we want. Okay, it's almost done. It's dried out. The garlic is nice and piping hot. It got a chance to cook, and you might be saying that how can he cook the garlic so less, as in time wise? Why? Because the garlic was thin. When a product or when an ingredient is very thin, what happens is the cooking time reduces. Why? Because it doesn't need a lot of heat to make it tender. Okay, now as you can see, it's done. I'll just mix it up once, and now I shall transfer it into this. So now I've added all the tomato into this. Firstly, you'll start mixing it. So first mix it, fold all the flavor in, and basically it's not the flavor, it's the garlic, all the herbs, all the spices. And now give this a lid and cook it on high heat for at least 2 minutes. Now the reason behind cooking it for 2 minutes on high heat is, that you want the tomato to cook. You don't want the tomato to be added with the water and start boiling. The consistency of the recipe changes, remember that. But with this, what you can do is shift it on the side and use all this flavor in the mutton. The mutton goes in, which is completely dry right now. Why? Because I strained it and I took all the water out. You mix the mutton in properly. Bring it back to the stove, give it a lid, and cook it on high heat for 2 minutes. So till the time this is cooking, what I'll do is I'll just clear out my station, and then I'll tell you what to do next. I've given it around 2 minutes to 3 minutes on high heat, and the tomato has cooked properly. Okay, now you can see the texture of the recipe and the consistency. It's perfect and it's nice and aromatic. Okay, so now what you'll do is you'll add around 3 cloves more, and you'll add the black cardamom. Now this is not done over here. You need to add the water. Why? Because now we want to cook the meat more. So add around 300 ml. Why? Because we used 450 ml of water in the beginning. So we'll add 300 ml of water. Transfer it over here. The water is basically broth. Mix it. And increase the heat to full. Now when the heat comes to full, you need to reduce the broth to at least 25% less. Why? Because we want the texture to get really thick. Okay, it doesn't end over here. What you need next is you need some yogurt, which I'll add over here. Around 1 cup, because it will give it a nice texture, and that is the flavor you will need. Okay, try sourcing out all of the ingredients or all of the yogurt or other spices from the ramekins, the woks, everything. Why? Because it's nice to save and conserve. Why? Because Mother Nature is already under threat, and it's our responsibility as individuals to respect all the ingredients we use in our cooking, on our daily life even. Okay, when this is done, you can see the texture. It looks beautiful. I'll give it a lid. I'll leave it on low heat for at least 10 minutes. And when it's cooked, I'll show you the final look. So as you can see, today's recipe is done. Quick and easy, and towards the end I just temper it, because why? That's how Pakistanis love their food. They love tempering their food towards the end, but different types of temperings are used when you cook. So this tempering was basically just red chilies, 4 tablespoons of oil, fried it, and as you can see, the dehydrated red chilies are hydrated again because of the oil. They're plump, they're nice, and when you eat it, you love them. I hope you liked today's episode. I'll see you in another episode of Indus Cuisine. Take care of yourself, lovely people. Bye-bye.